Hi everyone, this is Neve with OTTB on tap, and we're here with the legendary Lucinda Green. Lucinda, thank you so much for joining us, and we're going to pick your brain a little bit about thoroughbreds today.
Excellent, my favorite subject. I like your sharp brain. Very few thoroughbreds I've ever met are thick, and I can't say that about every other type of horse. I did have a wonderful Australian thoroughbred who was very difficult to sharpen up, and he eventually was found to have the most terrible foot problems on both feet, so you didn't realise it. And I think he suffered from discomfort, and therefore he appeared not to be sharp, but he was the only one that I've ever met. I love the brain is basically so straightforward. Every now and again, like in people and all types of animals, you get some ones that are a bit off the side, but on the whole I just love they're so much easier to understand, to teach. If they've had a tendency to be very hot, sometimes that doesn't leave them, but if you're lucky you have a friend who's in the racehorse world and he knows that you need a very sound horse, and you need a horse that's not, in England we'd say, an arsehole. It's a really interesting question, that, because we've seen horses coming through with 40 and 50% and managing, and we've seen horses with more than that and not managing. And somebody was trying to explain to me how it really wasn't a percentage of each, it was much more what happened way back and what came through with more power. So sometimes a 40% horse can have actually more aptitude, more thoroughbred, whatever it is that they have in them, than a horse with 60 or 70%. So I'm a little bit unsure how to answer that question, because I always used to think, oh, they must have 70-80% thoroughbred, but now I'm a bit unclear. But I do love to feel that I'm riding a thoroughbred brain, and if there's a counterbreeding there, I love it to be a pony, an Irish draft, something that's been for centuries, and I mean centuries, clever with his feet.
And as far as stamina goes in modern day eventing, you still think a thoroughbred is where it's at?
I think you have to get a warm blood fitter, and I think you have to work him harder, and this is a generalization which is always dangerous, but I have had thoroughbreds that you barely have to canter. They are so naturally fit and tough. I had two pure thoroughbreds. One won me the World Championships, and his name was Regal Realm, Australian, and I was given to believe he was by the Melbourne Cup winner Taunton. When I looked Taunton up years after Regal Realm had retired, he'd never won a Melbourne Cup. Anyhow, he was an absolutely brilliant horse who remained completely upside down in his neck. His ears were in my mouth all the time.
Yes, I just read about him.
Could not do dressage. Somehow managed to do a good enough dressage because lovely General Jack Burton from America was judging, and I had done something extraordinary in the winter when I'd come over to learn 3 days from Bert Denemothy on a scholarship, and the snow came down and we couldn't get out in the car, so I went out on my feet and trudged through snow up to here to get to Hamilton Centre and to have my lesson with Bert. And I don't think General Jack ever forgot that, and I honestly tell you, he gave me way more marks than I should have had for a test done in a jumping saddle, because the horse couldn't take a dressage saddle, with a very long outline, because if he came up, he came right up. I would say this horse, Regal Realm, had kissing spine, because he never ever basculed. He jumped everything boing up like that, straight across and down, and was utterly brilliant. So if he'd ever had an x-ray and they said he got kissing spines, can you imagine, he would never have got anywhere.
Right.
And the other one was a wonderful little horse who was incredibly difficult. Village gossip, not bred particularly in the blue, but he had definitely a thoroughbred. He'd gone around Burley at 6 years old, and he was very he just didn't pull up, he just went. And some very kind sponsors bought him for me for the princely sum, and it was a lot, £6,000 in those days. And of course I thought, now I've got this lovely horse that's been bought for me, I must get him to go. And I had refusal after refusal. I couldn't get him to go anywhere I wanted him to go because he couldn't tell him. And one day I thought, right, I was in tears, I just could not get him. If I wanted to slow down for a combination, he'd stop. If I slowed down for a coffee, he'd stop. So I said, right, the next event we're going to at the weekend is an advanced event. It was pouring with rain. I'm not going to let you go as fast as you like. I'm not going to do anything. And he went flat out, way inside the time. Only won anywhere near the time. Won from a back position in the dressage, won that advanced event, and that was the way to ride him. You never took a pull. You had him on the contact all the time, but you didn't slow down. You moved your back, your body, and if he would go rocketing into a coffin and just go bang, and he was 1 minute inside the time at badminton, and you could do nothing about it. And it came against me in the World Games in Kentucky when the humidity was 90%. And I had to let him go. He went round the steeplechase course, which was 5 or 5.5 minutes on that undulating ground, flat out. Went round the cross country, and he got to the Serpent 3/4 of the way round, a sort of zigzag of fences over ditches, never forget it. And he fell. And he never fell. And he fell straight over the fence into this muddy water. But being him, he didn't just lie there, he got up. I got back on, totally covered in clay water, unrecognisable. And it was one time I felt this is the wrong sport to have as a team sport. I don't want to have to finish with this horse. And such was his courage. He picked himself up and jumped really well, 3, 4 maybe fences to the finish. And as I cantered through the finish, my own chef to keep didn't recognise me. And I didn't run him in the show jumping because I felt he had to try his heart out. And he had a heart rate of 20 beats a minute, should be 40. And after that World Championships, it strained his heart enough for him now to be normal. He had a beat of 40 per minute. And the next time he came out was badminton, and he didn't feel right. He had a stop, and I didn't do any more with him for the rest of the year. So that was 6 months after Kentucky Worlds, and he came right back.
Wow. And
at 15, he was winning top level events. He beat Mike Tango the first time that he had ever done a dressage test on the bit. And it was the first time I had realised that if I kept my hand still, he would go on the bit. If I tried to get him on the bit, and it was the first time, and it took me till he was 15 to get a dressage test out of him that beat Mike Tango, who was pretty hot stuff with Bruce Davidson. So he was a remarkable, and both those horses were thoroughbred, and they were absolute geniuses.
Well, Lucinda, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us. We really appreciate having you on the podcast.
That's a pleasure. Thank you.